I'm Emily. I remember the day clearly, the day I said I do to Marcus. The sun was setting, its golden rays filtering through the tall trees that surrounded the garden where we had our wedding. My dress was everything I had dreamed of, pure white, laced, and with a train that followed me like a river of dreams. My friends and family were there, smiling, taking pictures, filling the atmosphere with genuine joy and laughter. It was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. Then there was Diane, Marcus's mother. Diane was a tall, imposing woman in her late 50s, with silver hair pulled back into a tight bun, and eyes that looked like they were evaluating the price tag of everything they settled on. She commanded attention. She wore a crimson dress that screamed, "Look at me," rather than happy to be here. Her makeup was just a bit too bold, with red lipstick that matched her dress almost too perfectly. The ceremony went smoothly, vows were exchanged, and I was feeling on cloud nine. Then came the time for photographs. The photographer, a cheery guy named Paul, was guiding us through various poses. Family shots, couple shots, shots with the bridal party. When it came to the mother-son shot, Diane took Marcus by the arm and smiled at the camera like she had won the lottery. "Perfect. Now let's get one with Emily and her new mother-in-law," Paul suggested. As I moved to stand beside Diane, she leaned in and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "At least you tried, dear." Confused, I looked at her. "Pardon." She gestured at my dress, then scanned the decorations, the setting, and finally settled her gaze back on me. "It's just that, well, not everyone can look like a princess, can they?" My face flushed red. I looked at Marcus, who had overheard the exchange. I expected him to step in, to say something in my defense. "Mom's just joking," Marcus said, laughing awkwardly. He pulled me in for the next photo, placing his arm around me a bit too tightly, as if holding me back from saying or doing something I'd regret. I took a deep breath and forced a smile for the camera, but I couldn't shake off Diane's words. In that moment, I felt a pang of regret, a tiny voice in the back of my head asking if I had just made a colossal mistake. But I brushed it aside. Weddings are stressful, I told myself. People say weird things. Move on. As the day drew to a close, our guests waved us off, throwing flower petals and shouting congratulations. We drove off in a car adorned with just married signs, but my joy was tinged with unease. Marcus noticed my silence on the drive to our honeymoon destination. "You okay, he asked, his eyes meeting mine. I hesitated for a moment, contemplating whether I should bring up his mother's snide comment. Then I decided against it. "Yeah," I replied, "just tired, that's all." We arrived at our honeymoon suite, a beautiful room overlooking a moonlit beach. Marcus pulled me close, whispering sweet nothings, and for a moment I forgot about Diane and her venomous words. Maybe it's a one-time thing, I thought, choosing optimism over the uneasy feeling settling at the pit of my stomach. As we crossed the threshold, marking the beginning of our lives together, I pushed Diane's words out of my mind. I chose to believe in the promise of happily ever after, ignorant of the storm that was quietly brewing on the horizon. That was the day I said I do, the day I committed to Marcus and unknowingly to a nightmare named Diane. It was the day that marked the beginning of a chapter of my life that I never saw coming, a chapter that would test the limits of my patience, love, and ultimately, my willingness to stand up for myself. Weeks had passed since the wedding, and I tried to settle into my new life with Marcus. We moved into my house, a modest two-bedroom that I'd inherited from my late grandparents. It was cozy, filled with warmth and memories. I loved that house. It was my sanctuary, but it didn't take long for it to become a battlefield. Working as a software engineer, my job was demanding but rewarding. Marcus was still in between jobs, his graphic design career not quite taking off the way he'd hoped. That meant I was the sole breadwinner, something that I was okay with initially. He said he was searching, and I believed in his potential. In the meantime, my paycheck went into our joint account, covering the mortgage, bills, and all living expenses. That's when Diane's visits started becoming a regular occurrence. They were never planned, always surprise visits, usually happening when Marcus was out, and I was working from home. It was like she had an uncanny sixth sense about when to catch me off guard. One fine day, I was on a conference call, presenting a project I had been working on for weeks, when the doorbell rang incessantly. I excused myself from the call, hurried downstairs, and opened the door. There she stood, Diane, holding a bag full of something that smelled suspiciously like her overly spiced casseroles. "Emily dear, you look like a mess. Busy day?" She eyed me from head to toe. "Hi, Diane. Yes, I'm actually in the middle of a work presentation," I responded, masking my irritation with politeness. "Well, I brought you some lunch. Figured you could use some real food," she said, pushing past me to place the bag on the kitchen table. "Thank you, Diane. But I was just about to... Couldn't you afford matching curtains?" She cut me off, her eyes surveying the living room. "Or is this what you call eclectic?" I clenched my jaw, forcing a smile. "It's a work in progress." Diane scoffed, moving through my home like a home inspector, analyzing each room as if she were calculating its worth. Or lack thereof. This carpet has seen better days, hasn't it? And those wall colors, really? Emily, didn't you consult anyone? The word stung, but I tried to keep my composure. "It's my grandparents' home, Diane. I've kept it as they left it. It means a lot to me." I went back to my call, leaving Diane in the living room, but I could still hear her murmuring disapprovingly to herself. Finally, Marcus came home, and Diane switched instantly to the picture. Perfect mother, showering him with affection. Marcus and I had a talk later that evening. "You know, Mom was just joking about the curtains and stuff, right?" he said as we settled into bed. "I don't know, Marcus. She's constantly criticizing everything." "It doesn't feel like a joke," I responded, pulling the blanket around me as if it could shield me from the growing discomfort. "Come on, she's old. School. Don't be so sensitive." That was the moment I realized Marcus would always stand by his mother, regardless of her behavior. The seeds of resentment were planted that day, taking root in the fertile soil of Diane's constant criticism and Marcus's unwavering support for her. The home that was once my sanctuary began to feel like a prison, each room a cell, and Diane the warden. My life was on a slow simmer, and Diane's words were the fire, stoking the heat day by day. Little did I know that the heat would soon reach a boiling point, reshaping my life and relationships in ways I never imagined. It's funny how a house that stood for warmth, love, and memories could turn into an arena where emotional battles were fought and lines were drawn. That was my house under Diane's rules. What was once my home had become her domain, and as each day passed, I could feel my sense of self, my peace, and my happiness eroding away, like walls worn down by relentless winds and rain. Months had dragged on since Diane's first intrusive visit, each day feeling longer than the one before. I found myself dreading my own home, anticipating her unannounced drop, ins that had turned into an almost daily routine. Marcus, of course, found this to be normal, endearing even. "She just loves us," he would say, oblivious to the tension that his mother brought into the house. My work had been increasingly stressful. With a major project deadline looming and my responsibilities multiplying, the last thing I needed was more of Diane's disruptions. But life has a way of piling it on when you least expect it. One evening, Marcus and I were sitting on the couch, barely speaking. I was engrossed in my laptop, coding away, and he was scrolling through job listings when the doorbell rang. I knew who it was before the door even opened. Diane, with her all-too-familiar air of Vince. "Marcus, Emily, I have wonderful news." She burst into the room, her eyes gleaming. "We're in the middle of something, Mom," Marcus finally spoke, not lifting his eyes from his screen. "Nonsense," she brushed him off, plopping herself down on the armchair that she had previously criticized for its hideous upholstery. "All right, out with it. What's the wonderful news?" I questioned, shutting my laptop in resignation. "I've decided to sell my house and move in here. With you two," she announced, as if she had just said she was giving each of us $1 million. "What?" Marcus and I said in unison, but for entirely different reasons. His was a question of logistics. Mine was an outcry from my very soul. "I think it's time we all live together as one big, happy family. Besides, it's getting a bit lonely in that big house of mine all alone," Diane added, already making herself comfortable as if she owned the place. "No, absolutely not," I finally spoke, the words coming out faster than I could think. "Emily, don't be rude," Marcus interjected, finally realizing the gravity of the situation. "We can discuss this." "Discuss. Marcus, this is our home." "Emily, calm down. It's not like she's going to live here for free, right, Mom?" Marcus looked at Diane for confirmation. Diane smirked. "Of course not. Think of all the free babysitting you'll get when you two finally decide to have children." I was flabbergasted. The audacity of this woman to invite herself into my home and then have the nerve to act like she was doing me a favor was beyond comprehension. "Marcus, can I talk to you? In private?" I got up, my legs shaky, my voice trembling. We moved to the kitchen, leaving Diane in the living room, who seemed to have already started planning where she'd place her porcelain figurine collection. "This can't happen, Marcus. I can't live with your mother. She already invades our life enough as it is," I nearly whispered, scared Diane might hear. "Emily, she's my mom. I can't say no to her," he said, his voice laden with guilt that wasn't directed at the right person. "So you can say no to your wife, but not your mother," I retorted, my eyes welling up. He sighed. "We'll make it work. Trust me." So, despite my objections, Diane moved in a week later, converting our guest room into her own personal suite. The first thing she did was replace my grandma's quilt that lay on the guest bed with one of her silk monstrosities, saying it didn't meet her standards. From that point on, my life became a living hell. Diane, the unwanted roommate, had effectively invaded every aspect of my life. My sanctuary was violated. My personal space shrunk to the confines of my home office, where I buried myself in work, hoping to escape the nightmare that my life had become. And Marcus was his mother's son, now more than ever, becoming an accomplice in the theft of my peace, my autonomy, and my home. Unbeknownst to them, however, their actions were filling a cauldron of resentment, and sooner or later, it was bound to boil over. When it did, there would be no going back. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Diane and Marcus would soon learn that this law doesn't just apply to physics. It applies to life, love, and the choices we make. When Diane moved in, the dynamic of our house changed entirely. No longer did I feel the comfort and security that a home should provide. It was as though I was walking on eggshells in my own house. Diane treated the place like her personal fiefdom, and Marcus seemed to have forgotten who actually paid the mortgage. Her presence was overwhelming. Her perfume, which smelled like a mix of roses and arrogance, permeated the air, her loud voice echoing through the walls and her commands and criticisms dictating the rhythm of the household. The first morning she was there, she took over the kitchen. Marcus had been trying his hand at cooking recently, making breakfast for us, a gesture that warmed my heart. But Diane couldn't let that happen, could she? "Marcus, what are you doing?" "Pancakes." "Good heavens, you'll make them all wrong," Diane clucked as she nudged him out of his cooking space. "It's okay, Mom. Emily likes them," Marcus muttered, retreating from the stove. Diane scoffed. "Well, Emily will like what I make even better." Her pancakes were rubbery and tasted like cardboard, but Marcus ate them with gusto, praising her culinary skills. I looked at my plate and then at Marcus. No words were exchanged, but my disapproval was palpable. Marcus caught my eye but quickly looked away. Things escalated rapidly from there. Diane didn't like the way I did laundry, so she took it upon herself to re-educate me on the proper use of detergent and fabric softeners. "Emily, you can't just mix whites and colors like that. Haven't you ever done laundry?" she lectured. "I've been doing my laundry for years, Diane. I think I've got it," I snapped. "Such attitude! No wonder this house is in the state it's in," she fired back, eyes narrowing. I clenched my fists, biting back the venomous retort on the tip of my tongue. My work was becoming increasingly demanding, and the added stress at home began to weigh on me. I was pulled in too many directions, trying to be a good wife, a good daughter-in-law, and excel at my job all at the same time. But how do you meet expectations when the goalposts keep moving? Marcus, too, became more distant. The pressure of job hunting and his mother's constant belittling seemed to transform him into a shadow of the man I fell in love with. He spoke less, smiled less, and stood up for me even less than before. One night, while I was finishing up a project in my makeshift home office, I overheard Diane and Marcus talking in hushed tones in the living room. Marcus, you know Emily's job isn't a forever thing, right? What's the plan here? Diane's voice was filled with concern and a touch of contempt. Mom, Emily's doing great at her job. She's been picking up the slack while I find something, Marcus defended me for once, albeit weakly. Yes, but it's her money, isn't it? In her account. What if she decides to leave? Where does that leave you? I don't know, Mom. I guess I haven't thought that far ahead. Well, you should, Marcus. A man should always be in control of his finances. The words stung like salt in an open wound. My fears, my suspicions, they were all true. Diane was planting seeds of discord, sowing doubt in Marcus's mind. And the sad part, Marcus was buying into it. The nightmare intensified when I found out that Diane and Marcus were planning a vacation together, a mother-son trip to Italy. I overheard them talking about flights, hotels, the works. And where do you plan on getting the money for this lavish vacation? I finally confronted them, unable to contain my indignation. From our joint account. Where else? Marcus replied, avoiding eye contact. Our joint account, the one that's been solely funded by me? Emily, you're overreacting, Marcus said, taking a defensive tone. Besides, if you don't agree, I could always divorce you, take half, and still go on that vacation. His words were a slap in the face. My husband, the man who vowed to stand by me, was now threatening me with divorce, siding with the very woman who had made my life unbearable. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I had been the dutiful wife, the understanding partner, the financial provider, and this is where it got me. No, enough was enough. That was the night the seeds of my revenge began to sprout, watered by the tears I no longer allowed myself to shed. If Diane and Marcus wanted to play games, they had another thing coming. I had tolerated, accommodated, and sacrificed, but there was a limit to my patience. And that limit had been reached. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Little did they know, winter was coming, and I was preparing a feast. As the days led up to Diane and Marcus's vacation, I found myself oscillating between disbelief and fury. Marcus had become increasingly withdrawn, avoiding eye contact and meaningful conversations. I suppose the weight of betrayal has a way of dragging down even the most indifferent souls. Diane, on the other hand, had never been more animated. She was practically glowing with the thrill of her upcoming adventure. One evening, they sat together at the dining table, noses buried in travel guides and faces, illuminated by the screen of Marcus's laptop. I think we should do a wine tour in Tuscany, Mom, Marcus suggested, scrolling through a list of activities. Oh, that sounds delightful, darling. You always come up with the best ideas, Diane purred, her eyes glinting in anticipation. I stared at them from across the room, a lump forming in my throat. The shared excitement, the camaraderie, it was a sharp contrast to the silent meals Marcus and I had been sharing lately. They were so engrossed in their plans, they didn't even notice when I left the room. But as they say, eavesdroppers seldom hear good news. My momentary lapse into self-pity was soon replaced by a steely resolve. They wanted to use my money for their little escapade. Well, they were in for a surprise. Have you two thought about how you're going to pay for all these experiences? I finally broke the silence during dinner a few nights before their departure. We told you, Emily. We're using the money from our joint account, Marcus replied, avoiding eye contact. The account that I solely funded, I retorted, emphasizing each word. Emily, stop being so selfish, Diane interjected. You should be happy that your husband is getting a chance to unwind. My jaw clenched so tightly I thought my teeth might crack. Selfish. I've been anything but. I've funded this household, tolerated unwarranted invasions of my personal space, and now I'm supposed to fund your vacation while you treat me like a doormat. Let's not make this about you, Emily, Marcus said, finally meeting my eyes. I told you I could always divorce you and still have enough to go. His audacity was like a punch to the gut. But instead of folding over in defeat, I found myself fueled by a newfound determination. Fine, I said, almost whispering. Use the account. Enjoy your trip. A smirk broke out on Diane's face, a look of victory that said she had tamed the shrew. Marcus simply nodded as though confirming a business transaction. They mistook my concession for defeat, unable to see the storm brewing behind my calm facade. Over the next couple of days, I began executing my plan. I contacted my bank to understand the exact process for blocking a debit card. The funds could easily be transferred to another account, a new one that Marcus had no access to. After all, the money in the joint account was legally mine. Marcus hadn't contributed a single cent. But to ensure he couldn't claim any legal foul play, I consulted with a lawyer friend under the guise of a hypothetical situation. She confirmed what I already knew. I was in the clear. The day of their departure arrived, and the tension in the house was palpable. I drove them to the airport, the car filled with a strained silence that screamed louder than any argument we'd ever had. "Take care of yourself, Emily," Marcus said as he unloaded their bags from the trunk. His voice was devoid of emotion, and he avoided my gaze. "I always do," I responded, the hidden meaning of my words dancing around us like a wisp of smoke. As I watched them roll their luggage toward the terminal, their figures growing smaller with each step, something inside me hardened. There was no turning back now. Driving away, my fingers tightly gripped the steering wheel. The moment of reckoning was almost at hand, and as I pondered the gravity of my next steps, I felt neither guilt nor remorse. Instead, for the first time in months, I felt empowered. All systems were go for Operation Retribution, and I couldn't help but think of the old adage, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." They were about to learn the truth of that saying in the most unforgettable way. The morning after Marcus and Diane had left for Italy, I woke up feeling a strange mix of emptiness and exhilaration. The house was silent, but the air felt lighter, as if it too was taking a brief respite from the constant tension. But there was no time to dwell on such feelings. I had work to do. After making myself a cup of coffee, realizing with some pleasure how much easier it was to enjoy the little things when you weren't under constant scrutiny, I sat down at my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before diving in. I logged into our joint account and initiated a transfer, moving the $220,000 into a new account that only I had access to. Then I called the bank and had our joint card blocked. The woman on the other end of the line seemed a little surprised by the request, but complied nonetheless. "Are you sure you want to block the card, Mom? This action will prevent any further transactions," she verified. "Yes, I'm absolutely sure," I replied, my voice steady and confident. With that done, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled deeply, a sense of liberation washing over me. It was as if I had just severed the last chain tying me to a sinking ship. My phone buzzed on the table, snapping me out of my brief reverie. It was a message from Marcus. "Call me ASAP." Ignoring it, I went about my day, attending to chores and errands I had neglected for far too long. It felt almost surreal to move through the spaces of my own home without someone criticizing or judging my every move. I could breathe again. The calls and messages from Marcus became more frequent, evolving into a crescendo of desperation. Finally, unable to resist the temptation any longer, I picked up. "Emily, what the hell did you do?" Marcus's voice crackled through the line, strained and furious. "What needed to be done?" I replied calmly. "Our card isn't working. We're stuck here, Emily." "Stuck? We can't even pay for the hotel. What were you thinking?" "I was thinking it's time for a change," I retorted. "Time for me to take back control." "Control? You call this control? This is madness, Emily. You have to transfer the money back, or else what?" "Marcus, you'll divorce me. That's not a threat anymore. It's an option I'm strongly considering." "You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. You and your mother tried to walk all over me, treat me like I was nothing, all while using my money for your comfort. You thought you could threaten me with divorce and take what's mine." "No, Marcus. That ends now." Marcus was silent for a moment, as if struggling to find the words. "I can't believe you're doing this, Emily. And I can't believe it took me this long to stand up for myself. You have your mother with you. I'm sure between the two of you, you'll figure something out. You're leaving us stranded in a foreign country, Emily. You left me stranded in a loveless, disrespectful marriage, Marcus. I think we're even..." With that, I ended the call. My hand was trembling as I put the phone down, but my resolve was unshakable. It was time for a new chapter, one where I was the author of my own destiny. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, contemplating the gravity of what I had just done. Emotions ebbed and flowed through me, guilt, relief, sadness, and a powerful sense of liberation. As I finally drifted off to sleep, one thought became increasingly clear. Revenge wasn't just a dish best served cold. It was a dish best served empowered, wrapped in self-respect, and garnished with a sprinkle of poetic justice. I had reached the tipping point, the moment where endurance morphs into action, where victim becomes victor. My nightmare was finally over, and as dawn broke, heralding the start of a new day, I realized I was more than ready to wake up from the dream that had turned sour. I was ready for my own adventure, a journey of self-discovery and rebuilding, funded by my hard work and experienced on my own terms. And so, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow on the world outside, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I didn't know what the future held,